समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
One of the most searched names on Google in recent days has been that of a young man called Viraansh Bhanushali. An Indian from Mumbai, Viraansh made waves and his speech quite literally broke the internet as he shut down the Pakistani side at an Oxford Union debate. A debate where he was arguing against the motion, a debate that spoke about how basically India's policy towards Pakistan was driven by populist politics. That was the essence of it. Viraansh used a combination of facts, firmness, and above all, wit and humor to close down the Pakistani side and emerge a winner in India at least, but his speech is viral across the world. In a moment from now, we'll be meeting the young man who is now a household name. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Who is Viraansh Bhanushali? Well, he's a jurisprudence student at Oxford, but more lately, he's made a name for himself by quite literally breaking the internet. This happened as part of an Oxford Union debate, a debate in which India was pitted against Pakistan, and everything from 1993 to Pahalgam, 2611 to Operation Sindoor was the subject of debate. The interesting thing is, it's not as if Viraansh is not friends with some of the Pakistanis that he was debating. In fact, at one point in the speech, he quite let it slip that he'd even worked on the speech made by his adversary. Real life is complicated, but this student debate was not very far from real life. It used facts, history, wit, humor, and repartee to present India's case extremely effectively, extremely powerfully on the global stage. His speech has been watched already by millions, shared by many more, and I want to welcome this young man to our program today. Viraansh Bhanushali is joining us from Mumbai, and we're going to be playing at least two little bits from his now extremely viral speech. Viraansh, congratulations. And let me ask you this. Did you for a moment think that you're going to be so crazily viral, that you're going to be like just this, searched name, everybody's talking about you? Did you expect this when you entered this debate?
No chance. In fact, I was much more focused on my election the morning after. So it was a genuine surprise to me, I think, the extent to which this has gone. But also at the same time, I'm not surprised that the debate as a concept has reached the masses that it has, because there was a big reason why I wanted to do it. I think this is the kind of topic that the Indian side, especially in large representative groups, has not gotten the chance to talk about freely and intellectually and properly. And I think me and my team, we managed to do that in the most apt way possible. And I was always sure people would listen, but I was not sure it would go to the extent that it did.
Well done. And we're all so proud of you. But let me ask you this. How long did you work on your speech? You were referring to a written text, so you clearly spent some time working on it. And how did you research it? I mean, you're a young, smart man, that is clear. But there were historical references. You took your debate to the 1990s. You spoke about Dawood Ibrahim. You spoke about a time when you weren't yet born. So how long did it take you to actually get your facts together?
I think the idea is not that the 6 hours I actually spent typing is when I worked on the debate. I think that I've been working on the debate in my head for a while, because these conversations always happen at Oxford. India's accused, India's asked to defend itself. The points I made in the debate, I've made with friends, I've made with sort of acquaintances over the years. To a certain extent, especially post-Operation Sindoor, this has become a big topic. Why is India acting in the way that it is? The idea was not that, this was just a 6-hour-long type-down effort that I did. It was the collective understanding that I've taken time to develop of Indian foreign policy that came out. But in pure sort of numerical metrics. I think I got to know around 2 p.m. the conclusion that we're going to do a student debate. So I had, give or take, around 6 hours to write it.
And, I think it's very important that you say that these are actually debates you have in real life. And particularly for Indians who live abroad or study abroad as you do, there is a sort of understanding of India and India's challenges with terrorism through the Western media. The Western media isn't always either fully aware or fair to India. So I think my question is, quite outside of this debate, have you run into arguments like these with your friends as well?
Oh, of course. And I would say 99% of them have been civil, have been courteous, have been spaces where I've been allowed to voice my opinion. I've heard theirs as well. But it's what really troubles me are the 1% where you have these issues that come up, but people are just unwilling to listen that, there is another version of the truth that might actually be sort of proper. I think somebody once, I think it was Ryan Macbeth, that called the current crisis between India and Pakistan the first post-truth war, wherein both sides can't even agree on basic facts. And a good chunk of that, I think, is because there's only one side that's been going out and sort of putting out this sort of feudal viral narrative. I think it's about time we took the narrative back in our hands internationally as well. And that's, I think, what we try to do here.
So let me play out this moment from your debate where you basically reference your being from Mumbai, a city that has seen terrorism in the 1990s on 26/11, and in fact other incidents as well, many of which I have reported from the ground. And so this really spoke to me. And this ends with one of the lines that has become madly viral, but I'll let the audience, especially those who haven't seen your speech, have a look at it for the first time. Take a look.
I grew up in the heart of Mumbai. My home was not too far from where in March 1993, RDX explosives ripped through Plaza Cinema. It was a part of a coordinated series of 12 blasts that turned my city into a morgue. 257 people died. I was not born there, but I grew up with the crater it left in our psyche. Now ask yourself, was there an election in March 1993? No. That election was 3 years away. Was the government looking for a populist distraction? No. The government was weak. The economy was opening up and we were desperate for stability. Terror did not come because we needed a vote. It came because Dawood and the ISI wanted to fracture India's financial spine. That was not populism. That was an act of war. I remember my aunt, once again, vividly, traveling through Chhatrapati Shivaji terminus. She pulled out of the train station at 9:27 p.m. and the terrorists entered at 9:30. 3 minutes is the difference between my aunt watching from home tonight and her being engraved in a memorial stone in South Bombay. 10 men held the city of 20 million hostage. Now look at the policy response. The proposition says that India is populist. What would a populist government do after 26/11? The public rage was nuclear. I remember it. We wanted blood. We wanted the Air Force to flatten the training camps in Mudarke. A populist leader would have just launched the jets to win the next election. But the government of the day, the Congress party, chose strategic restraint. They chose diplomacy. They chose to send dossiers. They appealed to the international community. They appealed to you. Did it work? Did the non-populist approach buy us peace? No. It bought us Pathankot. It bought us Uri. It bought us Pulwama. We learned a hard lesson, Mr. President. You cannot shame a state that has no shame.
All right, very powerful words there, very specific. You cannot shame a state that has no shame. This has become a quotable quote, Viraansh, from your address at the Oxford Union. Talk a little bit about that line, and then I'll come to the rest of it.
I think that line sort of was built up to by this idea that I was presenting, that especially after the first proposition speech by Musa, this larger narrative that, India has just gone effectively crazy. It's just going to shoot jets every time there is anything that happens, any terrorist attack that happens is going to automatically blame Pakistan. I think my idea with this entire thing was to counter the fact that we tried something else. For decades, India's foreign policy was to send these dossiers. Up until Pathankot, we effectively let Pakistani investigators into Pathankot airbase, and they ended up spying on us. That's another nightmare altogether. If we do all of that, we've laid out a red carpet for you to, because Pakistan often claims we're the largest victim of terrorism. right? These scams are outside our control. They hurt us too. We have given you information. We've given you data to stop this. If you still cannot do that, after all the naming and shaming that we've tried for decades, perhaps it's right for us to conclude that the solution to a shame that has no shame is to a state that has no shame is not to shame it, but something else.
I want you to talk a little bit about being a boy from Bombay or Mumbai, because, in a way, many cities in India, many states in India have been at the receiving end of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism through their proxies. But in particular, Mumbai, you talk about the Dawood Ibrahim years. Dawood is, reported now for years to be in hiding in Pakistan's Karachi. You talk about 26/11, those images are on our screen. You talk about not yet having been born in the 1990s when serial blasts would rip through the city you're from. But you speak about your aunt's experience, how a few seconds, a couple of minutes saved her life. I'm sure your sort of growing up, the way the conversations at the dining table, what your family spoke to you about, how you came to understand terrorism, how you probably watched it as a young boy, if I may use that word, on 26/11, also shaped all the thoughts you have today. So talk a little bit about that.
So my aunt is Bhakti Fuya. She's been asking for me to name her for a while. So there you are, Bhakti Fuya.
I'm glad that the aunt finally has a name. Well done.
She's my father's sister. So I found this out like much later. I think I was having a random conversation about sort of this, I think right after we had done the Balakot strikes, about terrorism on the dining table. Imagine this; these are dining table conversations in the country where the impact of terror is not felt sort of magnanimously towards one side. Everyone feels it. And so the larger point I think I'm trying to make here is, you take 1993. I was not there, but to this day, there are conversations in the family of the blast that happened. My nani's house was not far at all from Plaza Cinema. In fact, I had the erstwhile owner of Plaza Cinema reach out to me as well, saying that he was very glad I brought this up. Things like this, even though I'm a decade later born, still have a conscious impact on all of us. And even 26/11, it's just emblematic of the fact that India's richest city, India's most privileged people even, are not secure or are not safe from the impacts of terrorism, are not safe from the impacts of cross-border violence in the way that it occurs. And I think that's really the point I wanted to hammer home. For a lot of people, especially in the UK, terrorism is this sort of intellectual exercise that happens halfway across the world. You never see the consequences of it. We see it. We felt what it feels like to have your windows shake because of a bomb. When you felt that, terrorism is not just something you can talk about from from like a perspective of morality or from just a perspective of academia. It is a real experience. It's a real feeling that really informs our policy on a national consensus as well.
Yeah. And, there is this Western double standard. As somebody who has spent a significant amount of time either studying or sort of working abroad in patches of my life, what really galls me, at least, and I don't know if you're going through this at Oxford or in the UK, is that what is considered self-defense by Western nations when it comes to themselves is considered aggression if India were to do the same. So, for instance, America can go in and take out an Osama bin Laden under the nose of the Pakistan army from Abbottabad, and that is not considered, anything but America's right to defend its national interest. But if India were to bomb, terror bases and terror groups like the Lashkar and the Jaish headquarters, as India did in Operation Sindoor, it is considered by sections of the Western media and indeed by Western governments to be warmongering. And I'm just wondering how, as a young, proud Indian, you grapple with these sort of stereotypes, this kind of double speak in the country you're studying in presently, or even when you travel.
I think the best example that I can give of this is, in fact, this May. So I was in the Netherlands on my year abroad at the time when Operation Sindoor broke out, when we started it. And I had the privilege, that a lot of people in India didn't, of being able to access both Indian and Pakistani media on the same issue because the geo-blockers wouldn't work. And it would be pretty interesting to see that the same thing that the Dawn is writing about almost verbatim is ending up on the BBC or Sky News. To this day, I have not seen a bit of credible evidence when it comes to the jets shot down or multiple claims of the Pakistani establishment and DTI SPR. it is the double speak to me. I think is a larger sort of phenomenon that exists because of sort of two problems. I'd say one is I think Indians abroad, especially, need to have a larger voice. We're too nice as a people. I think that's part of our culture. It's a good thing. But I think the time has come to really step up when it comes to placing our truth. It'd be very interesting to see. So I was, I think it was a daily thing. I would open up the print and watch Shekhar Gupta sir talk about what happened the day before, and you compare that to what you're just receiving on your like average news feed. You think, where are these people getting these things from? And and then perhaps you start to notice the commonalities in the news feeds. You start to notice that this is not something that's happened on its own. This is built. This is a part of the hybrid warfare strategy that is used. You see it
So you're basically saying we need to be better at our messaging. We need to be better at our PR. The Pakistanis, by the way, are propagandists, and they've been very effective propagandists. But on the idea of propaganda, going slightly off topic, have you seen Dhurandhar?
Yeah, I actually just watched it 3 days ago. Funnily enough.
What did you think? I thought it was a great film, but I don't know what you thought.
No, I thought it was a great film as well, and I think this is what happens. Right? Cinema has been an arm of the state. Cinema has been an arm of communication. That's inception. I think people with a basic understanding of how to figure out their own facts don't need a movie to tell them A, B, and C. I don't think the movie incites it. It doesn't matter what the exact factuality of that movie is. The greater aspect there is the fact that this is a narrative of what a country went through. This is a communication.
Absolutely.
And as somebody who belongs to a free speech society like like the Oxford Union, the idea of free speech is not to just let one side speak. It's to let both sides speak. If you have a problem with Dhurandhar, you're allowed to voice your opinion and make sure it reaches the masses. It's that simple. It should not be this larger cataclysmic thing that the country talks about. It's a movie. It has an impact on public narratives. I agree.
I only brought it up because I think you were making the excellent point that sometimes we're too nice, we're too genteel, we're too polite. We don't necessarily, and when I say we here, I'm just talking about India loosely, and we battle this sort of Western stereotyping, and it's bloody irritating. But I think something is shifting in the conversation there, and interventions like yours have really contributed to it. The other thing I loved about the debate is that you didn't lose your sense of humor. And I think a debate needs to have wit, and it needs to make the points that you feel passionately, but in a way that your opponent is not getting under your skin. And the moment you lose your sense of humor, you've actually partially lost the debate. That's actually what I believe, which is why no matter how provoked I am in my programs, I try to never stop smiling, because I think that's such an intrinsic part of remaining in control. So I want to play out this lovely moment from the debate where you actually talk about your personal camaraderie with the person you're debating, who is Pakistani, who's also the president of the union. And I won't give it away. Let's take a look at this.
First, we have our union president, Mr. Musa Haraj, leading the charge for the proposition. Musa is not only the president of this union, he's also Pakistani by birth and a very, very dear friend of mine. In fact, as his chief of staff, I've spent months working with him, which makes tonight a tad bit awkward, because technically, I'm supposed to make him look good. But here I am, last night, writing his speech for him. Musa, you've had an interesting term, haven't you? Just a few weeks ago,
Point of information.
Yes.
So you're admitting in a chamber that what I just said was written by an Indian you.
To respond, I shall gladly admit that sometimes it takes an Indian to clean up the incompetence of a Pakistani.
Well, the thing is that's the line you couldn't prepare. That was the organic repartee, and that's what makes you an excellent debater, right? Great speech, but you couldn't have prepared for that, right? Sometimes it takes an Indian to clean up the incompetence of a Pakistani. Now, tell us how this works. You're clearly friends with the person you were debating. He's from Pakistan. He is the president of the union. Did you actually write a speech?
So I think the wording has been taken slightly out of context.
Right.
I was describing the fact that last night, where perhaps I should have been writing my own speech and preparing for it, maybe I would have had to look through paper less. I was there writing his. It's a very funny phone conversation that we had, which was Musa called me. He said, Viraansh, have you written your speech yet? I was like, no, not yet. He's like, can you write mine? I'm like, Musa, I'm speaking against you. I cannot write your speech. And he's like, you're still my chief of staff, right? I was like, crap. So I mean, I also have a duty to the institution. So if I didn't do that, I could potentially get ODC'd, which is like a disciplinary committee. But no. It's also, I think, a larger case of the fact that it's not like I wrote the entire speech. He gave me some notes.
But you helped distill
I
it?
was there last night, the night before the debate, helping him put it together at the cost of my own speech. But I think the point there is that even if, let's say I wrote the whole thing, I give you the best argument possible for the Pakistani side. If still I've managed to dismantle your arguments, maybe what I'm saying is true.
Absolutely. But tell me, how does this work for you as an international student? You clearly have friends who are Pakistani, and the quarrel that Indians have is not with Pakistani people per se, it is with the Pakistani state. And I think that capacity to distinguish between the state and the people is something that is also important to remember at a time like this. So I want you to talk a bit about that.
No, I completely agree. And, to a certain extent, I also agree with this idea that Pakistani people are also victims of what their state does. And this is, I think, one of my sort of conclusory lines to a point, which is you cannot give them bread, so you give them the circus. The cost of the populism that Pakistan actually inflicts on its own people, that it disguises as security, is that people today can't afford basic necessities. The Pakistani state is as much an enemy, considers itself as much an enemy of India as it is its own people. I think when I argue against the Pakistani state, perhaps I'm arguing for the Pakistani people in my head.
But sometimes there can be a little bit of tension. I have at least a couple of good Pakistani friends whom I've known for many, 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 many years, and we agree on absolutely nothing. And we have to find spaces within which we can still build an equation. So does that happen to you?
Of course. I mean, there's, when there are times that me and sort of fellow Pakistanis at Oxford disagree, especially when I'm in a working space with them. If the president and the chief of staff are not talking to each other, there are larger third order consequences that are going to happen. And I also have an obligation to the institution. So that obviously also comes in. But I think it's a larger idea of the fact that you have to be able to distinguish where you draw your lines, even as friends. Mine and Musa's relationship as friends has that taken into account always. I think there's a very etched moment in my head when I first was very vocal about Operation Sindoor, which was around when it happened in May. I posted a lot of Instagram stories. I lost a lot of friends that were Pakistani as a result of that, because of my support for the Indian government. And one of my former Pakistani friends actually went up to Musa and asked him, how can you still be friends with Viraansh? He's pro-India, whatever. And he was like, and this line still sticks with me.
I mean, what do they expect you to be? Like,
exactly.
You're Indian. Exactly. Why won't you be pro-India? Like, I don't understand.
Exactly, right? And so the line that he said was, I cannot make a man argue against his country. And I think if you have that amount of respect for two people as individual human beings, that you respect each other's ideas, intellect, and qualities, arguments and debates can occur. And I think that's the spaces we need to promote.
I think what's also, Viraansh, refreshing to see is that it is possible to be liberal in the truest sense of the word, which means that you have space for another person's argument, but your red lines are your own. And I feel no apology, no defensiveness in being socially liberal, intellectually liberal, but emotionally, fiercely Indian. And I think in many ways you captured all of that in how you expressed yourself.
Yeah. No, and I sort of agree with this idea as well, that if you just basically break down our culture, I think our culture is one of respect. My job when I'm out there debating with people is not necessarily to put the other person down. It's to put my country, it's to put my topic up, right? And I think when people understand that distinction, that you can win, not necessarily by putting someone else down, but by making sure that your case, your arguments are strong, I think that's where the real debates come in.
I want to end on a lighter note. How are the proud parents? Of course, the proud aunt, the much referenced Aunt Bhakti. How's everybody feeling? I'm sure they're beaming from ear to ear, but how's this playing out among friends and family?
was a very fun story my dad actually told me. So what you don't see in the video is, in fact, my mic was slightly off that day. So people in the chamber couldn't really hear me that well, nor could my parents. So my dad actually walked out of that debate thinking it was a bit of a crap speech. And then he saw the video and he was like, oh my God. So
That is funny. That is funny. That is funny.
Everyone's very proud. Everyone's very happy. I'm very grateful for them. I could not be at Oxford. I could not even % of where I am today, if not for my parents and for my extended family. And, maybe I'll take this moment and say thank you, everyone.
Oh, what next? I know you're studying law. You're studying jurisprudence. Any plans for the future, or too early to ask?
Well, this is, I think, an idea I've always had in the back of my head, and perhaps after this, I'm going to take it a lot more seriously, which was focus on, of course, my training contracts, the law career later, but take my year out after I graduate, come back here, go to Delhi, work for a year, give one attempt at the UPSC. We get it. We get it. Yes. I get it. I don't get it. You'll see something else. But now that's become a much more serious contention, given the space that potentially I can provide.
Well, I was just going to say that after you have represented India in the way that you have, I think a lot of people would like to see you in public life in your own country.
Yeah, but I think the biggest thing for me is there's a lot more deserving people than I am as well. I think the UPSC is so fiercely competitive. Serving India is so competitive, and that warms my heart as well. So many people want to work for the country. People often ask me why Oxford. My usual response to them is because it was easier to get into than NLU Delhi.
That is actually not even untrue, and I see where. Yeah. But listen, this all sounds brilliant. Would love to see somebody like you in our civil services, in some form of public life. A lot of comments in the audience are saying this is a young Shashi Tharoor. Have you heard a little bit of that in the last few days?
Yeah, I've been getting that. I have my own sort of massive respect to Shashi Tharoor. So we also reached out to him for this debate. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. Especially from the Oxford Union's perspective, his speech was, I think, one of the first ones that took us as an institution in sort of the media sense to where we are today as well. So we're also always grateful for him for that. But I think Shashi sir is amazing. He's done a lot for the external affairs of this country as well. And perhaps if I'm merely a shadow of him or Jai Shankar sir, I think I would have done my parents and myself a little bit proud.
Well, we're all very proud of you. I think it's been brilliant. There are so many comments in the audience. Also, one saying, as mother, as son. So somebody's doing a special shout out for your mom there. And I'm sure your parents are very proud. But even people
My dad right there, actually.
Oh, that's your... Is that you in the photo? Is that you in the photo?
Yep, that's
Where's that? What's the story of that picture?
Oh, that's us in Mahabaleshwar doing one of those ATV cart thingies.
Lovely.
I think I was like 3 years old in that.
Were you a precocious young child?
You should ask my mother.
No, really. It's great. It's brilliant. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I think you made so many Indians so proud. And may you keep shining and, love the idea of you in the UPSC or any form of public life in India. And this is, I think, genuine intellectualism, to take ideas and apply them to the real world and not leave them sort of between the pages of books. We wish you the sort of the very best, Viraansh. Well done and take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.